Well, good evening. It is hard to believe it's been a year, isn't it? Goodness gracious. But we've been so looking forward to coming. And although John Benny, one of my dearest friends in the whole world, is still in Rotherham and I'm in Solihull, yes, it's okay. Yeah, you can do that. It's fine. When I said to him, John, been invited back to Living Waters, would you like to come with me? He just jumped at it. So wanted to be here, so that's great. So, yeah. It's wonderful. So it really is good to be here. I think last time I was here, Sunderland and Newcastle played on the weekend I was here, didn't they? And the result was similar to last Saturday, wasn't it? Do you know, I did think about you all when I saw that result. Honestly, I thought, ooh, church split in Living Waters. Goodness gracious, there'll be no conference next week because the church will have split. But it is great to be here, genuinely, and we've been looking forward to it. And what a great theme for the weekend this is. If you're not sure what the theme is, we're looking at the idea of legacy, living in the power of the big picture. Now, when you hear the word like legacy, sometimes the danger is we think death, because a legacy normally happens maybe after somebody dies, but we're thinking about living legacy. We're thinking on the idea of how can we live today in such a way to prepare a living legacy for those who will come after us. And of course, when we say come after us, we don't just mean sort of in 5 years' time, but we mean right now, right here, in the context of what we're doing and where we're going. And the challenge of living in that world, you see, I think that's God's world. God introduces himself as a multi-generational God. And he says to ancient saints in the Old Testament, I am the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. Now, I don't think God was saying that because Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were his favorites. I think he was saying that to demonstrate that I am a multi-generational God. I don't just think about a moment, I am thinking about eternity. God describes himself as I am, which for me and you is a really difficult idea to get our head around when someone describes themselves as I am. But what God is essentially saying is that I don't have a past, I don't have a future, I just am. And that's because we have past and present and hopefully future. We think in a sort of a straight line. You know, we have a beginning, we live a straight line, and there'll come an end point to that line. God doesn't have a line. He just lives. And he lives above the line, below the line, before the line, in the line, and after the line. He's sort of there all the time. So when he says I am, it's because in every moment of history, he is fully existent and fully present. When God speaks to us, he's breaking into our little moment of time, but he's already beyond the fulfillment of the thing that he's saying to us. So he makes a promise to you today. He's already fulfilled that promise. The promise is already complete and done. He's just giving you a glimpse of what's already finished. Now, for me and you, it's hard to get our head around that because we're just like glued into the moment and we're just trying to get through the next 24 hours, never mind think about the next 24 years. But actually, when we start to understand the power of legacy, I think we get into the heart of God. I think God is interested not just in blessing me, John Andrews, at this moment in time, but God wants to bless forward through me. He wants others to be eventually blessed and impacted by my life, by my gifts, by everything I am and have. And he wants me to understand that my life isn't just about me, but it's actually about his purposes and his plans. One of the most selfish things we can do is think that our lives are just about us. And I know we've got to take our lives seriously, but over this weekend we're going to be challenging us that actually the greatest way to live a fulfilled personal life is to understand your life is not just for you. Yes? That actually we've got to think beyond the limitation of the skin that we're in. We've got to think beyond the limitation of the moment. And I know that's so hard because, as I say, most of us are just trying to get through a day. We're just trying to survive, trying to pay the bills, trying to raise our kids, trying to just meet the deadlines of the next 24 hours. And just to lift our heads above that is a challenge. Yet that's the challenge God's laying before us. Yeah. So the building that's being built out the back is not for today. It's not for today. It's not for you. It's for the future. Now, you'll get to enjoy it, hopefully. We'll get to celebrate in it, hopefully. But actually, here's the thought that if Jesus doesn't return, there could be people worshiping God in that building in 30 years' time. Or that building could be maybe one of many buildings that they're using as part of a bigger church network in this area. And they're using something that you had the courage and foresight to invest in today. And they're getting the benefit of it. Yes? So that's the theme of the weekend. Is that all right? We'll sort of tease that out. Just really chat to you, really, rather than... It's not going to be a big, hard and heavy preach, because this is the sort of stuff that actually, I think if local Christian communities get a hold of, and individuals get a hold of, families get a hold of, even business enterprises get a hold of, it can revolutionize the way we think. That we're not just trying to survive 24 hours, but we're building for the future. And what would our world look like? What would here's an incredible thought. What might your life look like today if our father and mother, if our grandparents, if our great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents had a thought of you? Yep. My family background's a really weird one, strange one. As one wee woman in Belfast put it to me one day, the Andrews family, they're either drunks or preachers. Thanks very much. But it's sort of true. And actually, when you look back into the history of our family, especially on my father's side, it's one, generally a very, very small-minded living. It's one of selfish living. It's one of, if you like, pursuing personal agendas and not really thinking too far into the future. So much so that when my father bought his first house, he borrowed £350 in 1961. Well, actually, it wasn't his first house, but it was their first, really, it was a decent-sized house, a 4-bedroom house in Belfast, a beautiful townhouse before the Troubles. And my father took the plunge, but to buy this house, he had to borrow £350. If only we could do that today. We'd have a dozen, wouldn't we? Yeah, have a dozen of those. £350. And when my grandfather found out that my father was borrowing £350 to buy a house. Now remember, the average salary back then was probably about £1 or £2 a week in terms of my dad's working world. My grandfather thought my father had lost his mind. And he said to my dad, what are you doing getting into all that debt? What if you can't pay your debts? And you see, my family before that had all been people who had never ever thought that they could own properly or aspire to that, and so they were renters all of their lives. And so my dad was like the first member of his family to own property. Amazing idea, amazing thought. And he said, I'm going to do it. And he said to my grandfather, when my grandfather said to him, why are you borrowing all this money? He said, I'm investing in the future. It's a good idea. Yeah? And actually, he did something. He broke a mold which allowed something to start happening. And there needs to be that mentality in our churches. Too many churches are in survival mode. It's just, well, let's just think about ourselves. Let's just get through a Sunday. Let's just see if we can survive another week. When actually, and I understand all of that, I know where that comes from, where actually God's saying to us, why couldn't we dream a little bit and think, what could we do today to prepare for the future? What could we do today that in the future people will go, thank you, thank you. Instead of in the future them looking back and saying, if only. If only you'd have had a wee bit of courage. If only you'd have stepped out a wee bit. If only you'd have done a wee bit more. They will look back and say, well done. What a courageous act. You stepped forward in the context that you were in. You took a huge step of faith, and because of that, we now have an opportunity to go further. That's the idea of legacy. Let me read you something from the Bible, if you want to follow it with me. It's in 2 Kings chapter 4 in the Old Testament. If you haven't got a Bible, don't worry about it, but listen to the reading. It's an interesting little story. Culturally, this story has a wee bit of a challenge for us, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But it has also a profound lesson for us in the context of legacy. Here's what it says, 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 1. The wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha. Now, Elisha was an incredibly influential prophet at that time. He was doing amazing things. Your servant, my husband, is dead, the woman said. And you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves. Elisha replied to her, how can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house? Your servant has nothing there at all, she said, except a small jar of olive oil. Elisha said, go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars. As each is filled, put it to one side. She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, bring me another one. But he replied, there's no more jars left, they've all gone. Then the oil stopped flowing. She went out and told the man of God, and he said to her, go sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what's left. What an amazing story. Now, every time I've ever heard that story preached on, it's been on the miracle. No one has ever had the courage to talk about the reason for the miracle. And it's the reason for the miracle that I want to talk to you about. Not the miracle. Well, the miracle's amazing. Goodness me. The woman's in need. She's only got a little bit of oil. The man of God says, gather as many jars and pots as you can and just start pouring. And quite literally, it seems to me that this miracle could have gone global. If she had had 1 million pots, she'd have got them full. The only reason the miracle stopped was because she ran out of pots. But what I want to bring to you is the dark underbelly of this story that no one really likes to talk about, no one wants to preach about. And it's this: a man of God borrowed so much money that his family was in so much debt that when he died, the only way to pay the debt was to sell his sons into slavery. Now, I don't want to judge the man of God. I don't know the circumstances, and I don't want to go somewhere where the Bible doesn't let us go, but that's the reality. Did you note the language? Look at what she says. She says, but now his creditor is coming. Okay, so the man of God has died. We don't know what happened to him. What is suggested is that his sons are young, because if they had been adult sons, then the likelihood is they would be hopefully in some form of employment or maybe working the farm or whatever, and therefore generating funds to service the debts. Yes, is that fair? So that's what we think. But actually, these boys are probably so young that they can't work in that way, yet they would be a valuable asset to a creditor. Now, here's something I have to explain to you in the Bible. It's not a very pleasant idea, but you need to understand it was there. That if I borrowed money from John Benny and I couldn't pay back that money, then John could take my family into slavery Now, the word slavery in the context of the Hebrew Scriptures, in this context, is a bit strong. We might say enforced servitude rather than slavery. So God didn't like the term slaves when it came to his own people. But the idea was, John would say, you owe me 20 grand. How are you going to pay it? I've no money. Right, okay, sell all your assets. So, okay, we strip everything out of the house, we sell it on eBay, and we're down to 19 and a half. He says, what else have you got? Nothing, that's it. That's all I've got. Then here's what he would say, right, you will become my slaves. And so what our family would then do, we would work for him for nothing until the debt was paid off. So John would design a scheme of works that says, right, this amount of work over this amount of time will pay off the debt. Yep. Now, God invented something called the Year of Jubilee, which was a fantastic idea that every 50 years, all debts were written off, all property that was sold could be returned to the original owner, and actually people could be liberated from the bondage of poverty. A brilliant idea, never really practiced, by the way, but a brilliant idea. An idea that would prevent generational poverty from ever increasing. A family could only be poor for one generation. It's a great idea. And God put that in place to stop people getting rich on the back of poor people and also exploiting the poor by taking their heritage, their land from them. God invented that idea to protect the rights of the poor. And so if it came to the Year of Jubilee and my debt wasn't paid off, John has to cancel it and let me go. So John, being a clever Scottish Jewish person, he works it out. Hold on, in 5 years' time it's Jubilee. So I will make sure they have paid off their debt early. Now, if he was really nasty and shrewd, he could do that. He could work us really, really hard pre-Jubilee to make sure he got as much money back. If he was a generous man, he would simply let us work what we could, and then at 50 years, he cancelled the debt. And that's us free. Yeah? So that's what's happening here. It's a bit of a weird idea for us in the 21st century. But when it says the creditors come, here's what he would do. He would take the sons of the woman and say, they'll work for me as my servants, my slaves, until your debt is serviced and paid off. Now, she doesn't want that to happen. She doesn't want her sons to become this. What mother would want her sons to be slaves? And she doesn't want that to happen, so she appeals to the man of God. Says, the man of God, will you help me? And then this amazing miracle takes place. And we celebrate that miracle. But I would want to draw your attention to the fact that the tragedy of why we needed the miracle in the first place. You see, let me say this to you. If you forget everything else to say tonight, remember this one thing. If you don't plan for the future, you are creating a crisis for the next generation. You'll create a crisis for somebody else. And what happens is, as individuals, as parents, as churches, we think only of today, and therefore we're not preparing anything to hand over to the next generation. And therefore, at the moment where one generation is coming to an end, either naturally or through premature death or injury, as one generation comes to an end and the other generation picks up, there's a crisis. We've got a disconnect. And that's what's happened here. For whatever reason, the man of God has borrowed so much money that when he dies, he passes, there is no means to service the debt other than taking his children into slavery. Now, I'm not sure what he borrowed the money for. I'm not sure how much money he borrowed. All I know is this, that in the decision that he made, he was jeopardizing the future. There's a lot of that going on today. You know, it's easy to look at our world and think it's doing amazingly well. Our world is on a knife edge. Absolutely. There are whole economies in our world on a knife edge. We have major nations in Europe that could topple over if pushed really hard. Bill Gates could buy Ireland if he wanted to, and a few other European countries. He's got more money in the bank than some of those governments. That's the precarious position we're in. Do you know how we got there? Greed. We thought about now. Right now. What can I get right? Doesn't matter about what might happen if the bubble bursts. Don't worry about it. Right now. What can we do? What can we get? What can we have? And any strategy that doesn't involve thinking about the future is creating a crisis for tomorrow. It's going to happen. Now, God can step in. God can do a miracle. God can fill the pots with oil. God can do anything because He's not limited by the short-sightedness of one generation or the greed of another. God can do amazing things. But here's the incredible thought. God wants to resource me and you in such a way, not just financially now, we're not just talking about money, we're talking about lifestyle, mentality, and attitude. He wants to resource me and you in such a way that we don't just think about the moment, but we think about what impact will my moments have, not just today, but tomorrow. Now, we'll say this tomorrow, we'll unpack it a little bit more, but every one of us is leaving a legacy. Whether you plan to or not, you're leaving one. We're all leaving a legacy. All of us, every person in this room, male, female, young, old, Christian or non-Christian, members of Living Waters or whatever other church you're from. It makes no difference. And you cannot take this seriously and go, I don't really care. That's your legacy. Your legacy is, I don't care. That's your legacy. Your legacy was, I don't care. And so the next generation picks up nothing. Pass me the baton. There is none. We've nothing to pass on. And actually, that's a challenge to us. It's a challenge to us in the context of I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a leader of the church, I'm involved in training and development of leadership around the world and around this country. And so there are multiple challenges that I'm saying, what am I doing today that isn't just bringing a level of satisfaction to me, which is hopefully happens too, but actually, what am I doing today that is going to prepare for tomorrow? Someone taught me this a number of years ago, and I've lived by it. He said this, your actions today are a prophecy of your tomorrow. Yeah? So my actions today, outside of miracles, God doing what only God does, and we must never discount the God of the oil, because God, you may have been given nothing from the past, and yet God has filled your cup to overflowing. Come on, who's with me? Yes? You may have been given no advantage from a previous generation that didn't think about you, didn't hand something unto you, yet the God of heaven has filled your life with oil, and you've got more going on today than you could have possibly imagined according to the background that you came from. That's the God of miracles, and we must never discount the God of miracles. But, wouldn't it be great if we caught the spirit of legacy and a generation didn't need to cry out in crisis for a miracle, but they could simply look at the God of heaven who has provided in them and through them and for them from those who've gone before them. That actually, look what God has done. That tends to be a very strong Jewish philosophy. They think multi-generationally. They think way beyond the moment. They think down the track. They think legacy. And actually, that's something that I believe that they've caught and learned from the heart of God. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Yes? And so our actions today, the actions of this church today, is prophesying. What are you going to build a new building for? What are you doing that for? You're prophesying. Prophesying that there is a future. You're prophesying that the future is going to be bigger than this. You're prophesying that God has a plan for this community. You're prophesying that God's going to raise up new leaders, and God's going to raise up new men and new women and boys and girls who are going to fill that building to overflowing. And God's going to do something amazing. It's a prophecy. And the easiest thing in the world would have been, let's just stay here. It's comfortable. It's easy. We don't have to worry about raising $250,000 to pay for this building. We can just sit here comfortably and not worry about tomorrow and just get through today. But the man of God has a dream and a vision that says we aren't just responsible for today. We've got a responsibility to tomorrow. And maybe if the man of God in this story, and please, I'm not judging him, and I hope when we go to heaven he won't beat me up for this, but if the man of God had have thought, hold it, before I take all this debt on, what will this mean for the future? Dawn and I have an ambition, a simple ambition in the context of our home. We will pass on no debt, no burden to our children. Our ambition is to give our children a head start beyond anything we ever had. Yes? That's the ambition. That actually, well, if I pass or my wife passes, then actually the first thing they realize, my goodness, we're going to have to sell everything we own just to pay my dad's debts. What a legacy that would be to leave. Actually, what an incredible legacy to leave. That actually, not only is there no debts, but we've been left something that will allow us to go further than we ever dreamed we could go at this stage of our lives. That's a great idea, isn't it? And the idea of legacy is a very simple one. It is to gift something. Normally, in the context of legacy, we think about property or money or stuff like that. But it's to gift something to someone, if you like, from the past. You're gifting it from the past or from a context of your own life, but you're gifting it to someone for the future. You've made a plan in the past, i.e. a will, that in the passing of your life, or even in your lifetime, you're able to pass something forward to someone so that they can take advantage of it. Now, of course, legacies don't have to wait till someone dies. You can have a living legacy. We can impart legacy as we live. We can invest and give as we go. It doesn't have to be something that happens when we die and someone reads our will and, they've left us, the budgie, or they've left us their favorite goldfish. It's not, we don't have to wait. You can live legacy while you're alive. But the strict definition of the idea of legacy is something bequested or bequeathed to someone, paying it forward into their life so that they can take a gift they didn't expect to get, and it enriches and enlarges their lives. The idea of legacy in its most positive form, because there's negative legacy too, isn't there? So if you meet people from a generation in a context that saw the Second World War, and you meet people from Central Europe, you meet people from the nation of Germany, they will talk to you about a legacy that haunts them, that everywhere they go tortures their souls, because it's a negative legacy, it's a bad legacy. So actually, a legacy can be a bad as well as a good, but in its most positive forms, here's what legacy points to. Number one, the giver of the legacy is thinking about the future. That's a good way to think. And we'll tease that out over the weekend. Secondly, the legacy is about empowering the recipient. It's a great idea. So, the giver of the legacy is thinking about the future. Whatever they give, it's about empowering the person who receives the gift. They want that person to be enriched, maybe quite literally, or helped, or supported, or encouraged. With me? And thirdly, and this is the glorious thing about legacy, it lives longer than you do. Now, of course, as Christians, we know we live forever. So when this body dies, we live on. We get that. But in terms of our physical demise, legacy allows me to live on after my body has ceased to live. It goes on and on and on. Yes? And I've been challenged this year afresh. Some of you may be aware, if you've followed me on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. 2013 was a year where this time last year, it was just looking like a normal year. By the end of 2013, my brother and my father were both dead, which was a complete shock to us. So my brother, who was only 52, same age as my best friends in the whole world, John Benny, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer this time last year and was dead by May. Now he's in heaven. He lived an amazing life. And you know what? At his funeral, he wasn't a preacher. He wasn't a leader of a church. He didn't have, a big high-powered job. He worked in security, and he was involved in the Boys Brigade, and he was involved in his local church heavily. My brother was a pastor's dream. He's one of those people always turned up, never complained, and any job that need doing, he would volunteer. He was that sort of a person. At his funeral, 1,000 people turned up. 1,000 people turned up at my brother's funeral. I preached at it. One of the greatest privileges of my life. And I looked around the room and I was seeing legacy. Conversations afterwards of boys who my brother had helped rescue through the Boys Brigade. Rough estate that he was working on, a lot of bad stuff going on in those estates. And my brother literally rescued boys who were now in good jobs, doing good things in their community. And they would say, your brother rescued me. Now, I don't want to get too sentimental, but I do want to say this. He's living on in them. Now, I don't mean that in some weird, magical, mystical, sort of postmodern nonsense sort of a sense. I mean, in terms of the effect of his life. It's living on. Yep. My father died just before Christmas. And again, that was a tremendous shock. My father became a Christian when he was 10. Loved Jesus all of his life. And an incredible testimony. And in all of the tributes that were paid, and no one coordinated the tributes, there were 4 or 5 tributes paid at his funeral. No one coordinated them. Everyone used the same 3 words: humility, generosity, integrity. Now, can I be really vulnerable with you? I just want to share this. I know this could be a bit sort of TMI, too much information, but I'll tell you anyway. When my father died, there was nothing left. You know what I mean? We aren't expecting a check in the post from the solicitor. Do you know why? Because he invested it all while he was alive. So he had a living legacy. John Benny met my dad, one of the most generous men you could know. My dad had a dream of owning his own grocery store in Belfast. It's true. He was a brilliant gardener. He could grow anything. He never had a garden, and yet he had an allotment, and he used to grow all his own stuff. My mother wouldn't let him open the grocery store. Do you know why? She said, "You'll give all this stuff away." That's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. Because he would have. A wee old woman would have come in and he said, "Don't worry about it, love, here you are, take it with you." And that was the sort of man he was. And my dad, we knew there was no big pot of gold waiting for when he died, because my dad had taken all the gold, if you like, metaphorically and literally, all the gold that he had, and he invested it while he was alive. That's a legacy. It's an amazing legacy. It's wonderful. What a celebration. And you see, it's to remind us every one of us will leave a legacy, whether we plan to or not. Now, the point of this weekend is make a plan. There's just one simple thought for the whole weekend to take home with you. This is it. Make a plan to leave a legacy. And not just a legacy that people will enjoy when you die, but a legacy that they're starting to enjoy while you're alive. Yes? Leave a legacy now. Give it away now. Invest yourself into people now. Do the things that in 5 years' time, if the things you're doing now came to harvest, you'd go, wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. Isn't that fantastic? And the tragedy of this story, though sort of eclipsed by a great miracle, the tragedy of this story is that somehow the man of God, who was a good man of God and revered the Lord, didn't look into the future. He sort of, for whatever reason, got caught up in a moment, found himself in tremendous debt, and then when he died, suddenly everything he worked for and built was now at risk. Wow, it's a challenge to me. Am I doing anything today as a father that's risking my children tomorrow? You know, I've got a life too. I want to enjoy myself. Yeah, I get that. But the minute you became a father, you gave up all rights to your own life. See, I can't make a decision as a man now on my own. I'm a husband, so I just can't make a decision about spending money. I have to think about my wife. And when children came along, it made it even worse. Every decision I'm making, I have to think, what would be the impact on the future of my children with this decision? Good, bad, or ugly. Now imagine if our generation today, church and non-church alike, just hesitated for a moment and thought, what would be the implications of these decisions on my future, on the future of my children, on the future of my children's children? You with me? I know this is challenging stuff. It might make us uncomfortable. We may not even like it, but it is worth considering. Here's what the Bible says. It's a challenging statement. A good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. It's in the Bible. Proverbs 13:22. Honestly, it's in there. Check it out. You know, what? So that's a challenge to perhaps a thinking that says, me, myself, and I. So now I'm being challenged. I can't just think about me. Let's think about my children. Well, I don't have any children. Well, let's think about tomorrow. All right? So use children metaphorically. If you're single, you don't have children, think about children in the sense of the product of your life. What am I doing today that will affect the outcome, the fruit of my life tomorrow? And so I'm not even being asked by God to be a good dad to my children. I'm being asked to think about the children of my children. Now, we live in a world today where people can't see beyond the length of their nose. They're spending today, they're giving their lives away today, like tomorrow's never coming. And not just people, governments. We seem to have this, where's all this money coming from? Who's lending us all this money? I looked at the economic figures of the British government, and it said borrowing was down. We're doing well. Borrowing's down. Last October, our borrowing went down to £9 billion a month. Your great-grandchildren will be paying that bill. And it's easy for me and you to go, oh, nothing to do with me. I'll be well dead by then. I'll be food for the worms by then. I don't care what debt we're in. But someone somewhere is going to pay that debt. We're only borrowing £9 billion a month. If I was running Renewal Christian Centre like that, I'd be sacked. They'd kick me out. Get out. Don't know what you're doing. It's unbelievable. The thought that actually pension contributions today are actually paying the pensions of today is incredible. And there's this sort of, we're all ignoring what might happen in the next 50 years. Now, I know, I don't want you worrying about that. You're going, I didn't come here to be thinking about what it's going to look like in the next 50 years. And that's the problem. Actually, we're generally not thinking about the future. We're living for the moment because that sounds sexy, and it sounds right, and it sounds biblical, and it's none of those. Living for the moment is the stupidest thing you can do. It's like taking your brain out of your head and putting it on a table while you go off and do your thing. It's stupid. Now, live in the moment, absolutely. Live in the moment, yes, 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 yes. Live for the moment, that's stupid. It's the stupidest thing we could do. Churches that live for the moment, parents that live for the moment, individuals that live for the moment, businesses that live for the moment, governments that live for... That's bonkers. It's Cracker's idea. And actually, if you and I can have the courage in the midst of our challenges and our bills and our deadlines and holding down 3 jobs and raising the kids, if we as a community could have a moment or two to breathe a bit of fresh, clear air with some blue sky above us, and just for a moment we could say to ourselves, if we had the power to change this, what would we do? And even if it was just changing one thing, We did a money program in our church last year, and in it, I encourage people to try and learn to save. Before you buy something, see if you can save first to buy it. Now, it sounds sort of obvious. I had people come to me absolutely shocked at the idea of saving. It was coming up to Christmas. I said, this year for Christmas, don't get into debt for Christmas, because debt for Christmas is not in the Bible. Don't do it, because Christmas nor debt's in the Bible. I just thought I'd throw that in. Anyway, you can work that out for yourself. What we call Christmas is a pile of nonsense. We knock ourselves out every year for something, and we blame it on Jesus being born. Jesus has nothing to do with that nonsense, honestly. Now, do I like Christmas? I do. Do I celebrate Christmas? I do. Do I get into debt for Christmas? Absolutely not. We've taught our children, we will not go into debt for you to have a present. What a stupid idea. Paying off the rest of the year for Christmas. And we said to people, here's an idea for you. Go cash at Christmas. Set yourself a pile of money and say, that's what we've got to spend. When that's done, it's done. I had a lady come to me with tears in her eyes in January, and she said this to me. It's the first Christmas I can remember that's debt-free. She said, I'm not facing January worried about bills. Now, what's that got to do with legacy? Well, it's a microscopic view of a bigger problem. People live for a moment. Oh, let's just have a great Christmas. Let's go mad. Let's spend all our money. Let's spend money we don't have. Let's knock ourselves out. Let's do it. And then they wake up January the 15th when the credit card bill hits, and they go, flip me, what have we done? Now, I know that's just a small example, but that's how a whole generation's living. If we're not careful, that's in the church. David, what about me? What about my problem? Fix me. It's all about me. It's all about me, Jesus. Now, Jesus wants to bless you. Jesus wants to do an amazing thing for you. Jesus wants to come into your life and make your life better. I believe it, I believe it, I believe it. But not so that it stops there. He's changed you so that you can bring change to your world. So that you can pay forward the change to your world. So that actually, whatever comes next, whether it's literally children or metaphorically the fruit of your life, whatever comes next is now changed. Because God has stepped into your world and changed you. Now, forgive me if I've upset you or offended you. I haven't set out to do any of that, but sometimes you have to use the sort of illustrations and analogies that just get people's attention to make the point. And all our lives we've dealt with families who are living for the moment. We keep trying to tell them, if you keep living for the moment, you'll never escape the moment. It will enslave you constantly. Constantly. We've got to find ways to break out of the moment and find a way to live beyond. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm drawing this to a close. Let me just draw some thoughts by way of introduction. It'll set us up for tomorrow. Here's 3 thoughts for you. First of all, we must learn to see tomorrow, not only today. That's legacy. So the first step of legacy is not money, it's not actions, it's not writing a will, it's not, the first action of legacy is seeing. When you see that tomorrow is important, you'll change. You'll change. If you can't see tomorrow, you'll go home from tonight and you go, what was he on about? He's mad. Why don't we get him back? Don't invite him back again. It's crackers. Yeah. But if you see tomorrow, this is all making sense. And actually, when we catch a glimpse that not only is tomorrow coming, but it seems to be coming faster than ever. I don't know if you've noticed, but my clock seems to be going faster. I'm sure between being 46 and 47, the calendar went quicker. I really am. I'm thinking the Lord missed out a few months. You know what I mean? 1st of November, I was 47. No, that's not for another couple of months yet. It's like, wow. I mean, this time last week. It feels like that, doesn't it? Not only is tomorrow coming, but it's coming quicker. It seems. Now, it's not, but it feels a bit like that. And one of the great challenges is we think we've got a lot of time. We actually don't. Now, and again, I'm not wanting us to be morbid, but I don't mean you're dying or anything. I mean, it feels like we've got a lot of time to do stuff, but it's amazing how long stuff takes to do. And it's amazing how quickly tomorrow comes. I went to renewal 2012, September. 17 months have passed like that. Unbelievable. It took us a year of preparation to go, and now we've been there. It feels like I've been there all my life. It's incredible. Where did the 17 months go to? My oldest daughter will be 21 in April. Where is my daughter, and what have you done to her? She was a baby 5 minutes ago. She's now 21. My son is 17 next weekend. I've bought him a provisional driving license for his birthday. What was I thinking? I wasn't thinking about the future when I did that. No, what was I thinking? Everyone off the roads. Simeon has got his driving license. It's wow. But I can remember, like yesterday, holding him, the first human being to hold him when he was born. It's like yesterday. I know I'm sounding like my dad when I say all of this sort of stuff. And the younger folks in the room are going, oh, poor lad, he's just having a midlife crisis. But I'm not. It's just going so fast. And you know, if the next 20 years of my life goes as fast as the last 20, oh, yeah, thanks, Dave. So the challenge for me and for you is, I mean, life's just hard enough as it is. But the challenge for me and you is actually tomorrow's coming. In one form or another, it's coming. So what can we do today to prepare for tomorrow? In our hearts, our minds, our spirituality, our faith. If it's relevant, our finances. If it's relevant, our family. Whatever's relevant to you, what am I doing? And you know, that was the single thing that transformed me. Maybe being a dad was part of that journey. But when I held Elena in my arms, tomorrow became really important. It's like, goodness gracious, I'm now not only responsible for trying to get me through a day and trying to hold together a relationship with my wife, but actually we're now responsible for the future of another human being. Wow. Tomorrow. The first step of legacy is just accepting tomorrow. Maybe for someone in the room, that's the first step. That's all you have to do. You don't have to do anything radical at this stage. Just saying, accepting tomorrow. Not ignoring today. We'll talk about that over the weekend. We want to live today. We want to live in today. Not for today. We want to live in it. But actually, it's just saying, hey, tomorrow's coming. Yeah? Secondly, we must learn to invest, not just consume. We must learn to invest, not just consume. Listen to these words. This is about Abraham. Some of you may know who Abraham is. If you're not sure who he is, but a famous Old Testament man of God. God called him out and promised him a son, eventually gave him that son. It's an amazing story. But it says this in Genesis 25, Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac. And then it goes on to say this. It seems to be a contradiction in the verse. But while he was still living, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them away from his son Isaac to the land of the east. So, actually, it sounds like Abraham cuts all his other children out of the legacy only to give it to Isaac. But that's not what he does. What he does is, he's very, very clever. He's very astute. Because he knows the promise of God resides in Isaac, he strategically organizes his finance so that he sends the other children away from Isaac, sets them up, you know, the Hebrew strong, sets them up. They're not left with, you know, a bag full of rice. They're sent away so that they can actually invest in their lives. But he makes room for Isaac. He wants Isaac to grow. His primary investment is Isaac. And it says, almost as a contradiction, it says, he gave everything he owned to Isaac. He left it all. Now, Abraham was seriously wealthy. We tend to think of Abraham, you know, camels and wandering around in the desert, this poor little nomadic man. Abraham, in the early stages of his story, and he gets richer towards the end of his story, the early stages of his story, he has over 300 male servants in his house. Now, how many servants do you need? You know, one to pour the coffee, you know, one to sugar the coffee, one to drink the coffee. I mean, how many servants do you need? He's mega rich in the context of his day, and he leaves it all to Isaac. Now, what that means is this. He understands that if Isaac's going to succeed, I have to set him up. So even though Abraham's life's coming to an end, what's he thinking of? The future. And he realizes all that I have accumulated wasn't really for me. It's for the future. It's to invest in tomorrow. It's to invest literally, in this case, into Isaac, who is the son of promise. I think one of the challenges with Christianity is we're too focused on heritage and not enough on legacy. But what do I mean by that? Heritage looks back. Look at what we have. Look at what we've done. Look at where we've came from. Very, very important. Very important. And we should be able to do that, look back, while at the same time look forward. The problem is that lots of church communities spend all their time looking back at what they had and not planning for what's to come. And that's why it's possible to have a brilliant heritage and a bankrupt legacy. What a tragedy it would be if my dad had left me £10 million. Now, that wouldn't be a tragedy. That would be good. But what a tragedy it would be, hear the whole story, if my dad left me £10 million, and when I came to pass on to my sons and daughters, there was nothing. I mean, at a human level, you go, goodness, that's a bit of a... It's bad, isn't it? Actually, wouldn't it be amazing if my dad left me £10 million and I thought, hey, do you know, I could enjoy a few things. I could buy myself a nice house, I could have a nice car, I could do a couple of trips around the world, and I'd still have £9.5 million left. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the lion's share of that, I'm going to invest it so that when I'm about to pass on, actually, not only have I got something, but I've got more. That's legacy. Legacy says, thank you for heritage, invest the heritage, and has more to pass on. And the goal of all of our lives must be this. Listen to me now. You'll hear me say this over the weekend a couple of times. The goal of all of our lives must be this: to pass on more than we received. Now, I'm not just talking about money. You hear me, don't you? I'm not talking about houses and cars and jewels. If that applies to you, great. Then it should apply to you. But I'm talking about your life, the whole sum of your life. I have personally received an incredible heritage. My dad became a Christian. My mum became a Christian when they were young. They broke vicious cycles in their own world. My mum came from a marriage where there was no love and no love lost, and a terrible upbringing. My dad's father, although he was radically converted in 1958, my dad's father was a drunk and a wild man. So they didn't pick much up, but they passed a lot on. See, that's heroic in my book. If you receive, metaphorically, £10 million and you pass on 10 million, you've failed. If I receive 10 million, metaphorically, I need to be thinking of at least passing on much more than that. Because if I understand what it costs to give me that heritage, and I invest that heritage properly, I can still have a brilliant life and still have lots more to pass on to the next generation. Do you hear what I'm saying? Do you understand where we're going there? Don't just get locked into money. And I'm talking about attitude and mentality. I don't know what was passed on here to the current leadership. I don't know what it was like 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. But the goal is, whatever you received, when we're passing it forward, it's got to be better, more than we received. Come on, are you there? Last thought, and then I'll stop. And you can go home, lie down. We must learn to prepare, not just play. It's the key point of legacy. Let me read you something that I learned years ago, which is very, very powerful. If we play today, we will pay tomorrow. If we pay today, we will play tomorrow. Yep. So if we play today, we may be paying for that tomorrow. But if we pay today, if we put the miles in, actually tomorrow we may be able to play. We may be able to enjoy all of that. We have a generation mentality today, and I don't want in any way to pick on one demographic. I think it's now spreading into right across many age groups. We have a mentality today that life is just, it's for having fun. If you're not having lots of fun, there's something wrong with you. I mean, I hate the adverts on holidays. And, Volkswagen brought out an advert where the dad buys the car for the wee girl as she goes off to university. Hate those adverts. I feel so guilty every time I watch those adverts. The family frolicking on the beach, and you could have the holiday of a lifetime. Disney World awaits you, and you feel like a complete klutz as a father if your children have never been to Disney World. And it's all about play. Just enjoy yourself now. That's what it's all about. And absolutely, who wouldn't like to play all the time? Wouldn't it be great if we could just play all day? I'd love to be able to play all day. I'd love to be able to just mess around and have fun all day. But actually, grown-ups understand. Can't play all day. We can play sometimes. And hopefully there is some play in our world and some fun. But we can't play all the time. Can we? Yet, we're sold a lie that you can. And that somehow, somewhere in the future, you can pay for it. Don't worry about it now. Just play. Yes? It's a dangerous mentality. And if we're not careful in the church, we sort of get a bit like that. That's just, it's the Peter syndrome on the Mount of Transfiguration. He goes up the mountain with John and James, and Jesus gets transfigured, and lights are shining everywhere, and Jesus is this bright, shining light. And Peter says to Jesus, let's stay here. Let's build some tents. One for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah, and we'll stay here. And we'll play. And it's what's fascinating in that story that immediately they go down from the mountain and they find a boy who is so severely demon-possessed that he cannot speak. He's deaf and mute. And the first thing that confronts them after they've been up the mountain is the shocking reality of a broken world. And right there you have the picture why we can't stay on the mountain and play. And I meet Christians, and genuinely lovely people, they just want to play all the time. They just want more all the time, more. And actually, I get all of that. I understand all of that. I know where that comes from. But do you know what? Actually, there's a moment to play, but a moment to pay. And I found in my life, the more I'm willing to pay and take today seriously with a view to tomorrow, the more opportunity I sort of get to have some play. But play's not the focus. As much as we would like it to be. Who doesn't like to play? In 1 Chronicles chapter 29, I'm drawing to a close. David, King David, the shepherd boy who became possibly the greatest king Israel ever knew, still revered today in current, present Israel as a national hero. David is coming to the end of his reign. He's asked God if he can build a house, and God said no. And the reason he can't build the house for God is because his hands are covered in blood. God says, sorry, I know your heart's good, but your hands are covered in blood. Can't let you do it. It's a holy place. He said, but because you've got a heart to serve me, you'll not build it, but your son will. So what does David do? He sulks. He throws his teddy out of the pram and he refused to cooperate. No. Here's what David does. He says, well, if I can't build it and Solomon's going to build it, I'll give Solomon everything he needs to build it. See, that's a legacy mentality. If I can't do it, it's not going to get done. No, David says, if I can't do it, I'll help the one who will do it. And in 1 Chronicles 29, it says this. Now, this will blow your mind. And I'll leave you with this thought. They gave Solomon money out of the national treasury, but David also gave Solomon some of his own money. Right? It's going to blow your mind. David gave Solomon 110 metric tons of gold. from his own money. Shepherd boy. You know the wee lad on the hill with a harp? Tell you what, writing songs, good money in it. You should just try it. Get in there, lad. Do you know what I mean? The Lord's my shepherd. It'll never work. Yeah. The royalties are still rolling in on that one. 110 metric tons of gold and 240 metric tons of silver. Now, that translates to 110. A metric ton is approximately 1,000 kilograms. All right? So it's 110,000 kilograms of gold and 240,000 kilograms of silver. Now, today at the hotel, I went on the Cost of Gold website. It's absolutely true. I am not making this up. At 5:15 today, this is hot off the press, a kilogram of gold today is selling for £24,755.82. Pence are important. You've got to get the pence in. That's important. So in rounded terms, 25 grand a kilo. David left Solomon 110,000 kilos of gold. I know you've already worked that out, what that is. It's a lot. I reckon that's close to £2 trillion, but you can work it out for yourself. My calculator kept freaking out because it was too many noughts on the end. To give you the idea for silver today, at 5:15 today, silver was selling for £391.28 a kilo worldwide. Okay? That means that Solomon was left £93,907,000 worth of silver in today's value. And you just read the Bible, you read that wee verse, and David gave Solomon some money. It's like, no, Solomon couldn't fail. If Solomon fails to build this, it's his fault. He can't turn around to his dad and say, well, I couldn't build it because you miser. Give me nothing. David gave Solomon 110,000 kilos of gold and 240,000 kilos of silver. And he said, I won't build it, but you can. What a mentality. That's legacy. Legacy says that I may not cross the line, but somebody will. Legacy says we'll plant a seed. We may never get to sit in the shade of this tree, but somebody will. Legacy says we'll build a house. We may not get to worship in it, but somebody will. Legacy says to our children, literally or metaphorically, says to our children, I may never be able to go there or do that, but you can. Some of you may have heard this story before, but I'll close with it. My dad worked down the shipyard, and he took me down the shipyard when I was 12, Harland and Wolff. Forgive me if you've heard the story before, but it typifies legacy. And he took me down the shipyard, we walked around, he showed me to all the places he worked. And what was a lovely joy for me last summer was the new Titanic exhibition is open in Belfast. If you ever go to Belfast, you've got to go to the Titanic exhibition. They spent £1 billion on it. £1 billion. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. It'll take you about 4 hours to go around it. It is staggering. Absolutely staggering. And I went to the footprint, the dry dock where they put Titanic. It's the only living memorial of Titanic, literal thing left, in terms of Harland and Wolff. And we went to the dry dock. And my daughter has this on Facebook and on video. And I went to the end of the dry dock, and she went to the other end, and she started videoing me, and I started running. Full pelt from one end of the dry dock to the other. Took me 1 minute, 30 seconds to run from one end of the dry dock to the other. 1 minute, 30 seconds. And I'm no slouch. I mean, I can run. I was like wiped out. That's the size of this thing. An incredible thing. And the joy was I took my dad back to the shipyard. It's like we went full circle. He took me there when I was 12. And here he is, and I've got one of my favourite pictures is my dad sitting in his wheelchair and me pushing him around under the big banner, Harlan the Wolf, H&W. So it's gorgeous. It's just a lovely moment. It's just God being good to us. I took my dad round, and it reminded me of the story that he took me down when he was 12. He worked in the moulding shop, and then for a bit of extra money every week, he used to go up and clean out the furnaces. These furnaces were massive, big cylindrical furnaces. And I remember my dad standing under the furnace, holding my hand, and we were looking up, and he said this. Now, hopefully you'll understand this from a sort of a working class culture like South Shields. I hope you understand what my dad said. He said, I'm working down here so you don't have to. Now, what he wasn't saying was, being in the shipyard's not a good job. He wasn't saying that. What he was saying was, there's something in you that's more than this. And I'm working down here to give you the chance so that you don't have to, so that you can go further. What a mentality. Here's what my dad was saying. I won't cross the line, but you will. I won't travel around the world, son, but you are. You will. I won't be able to go to Bible college, but one day you will. I won't be able to get a PhD, but one day you could. And he sacrificed, invested in us today, so that tomorrow, something, literally his seed, but it could have been something else, literally his seed went much further. I'm here today, standing in front of you, this wonderful audience, because my dad worked down the shipyard. Earned an extra £2.50 a week to clean out the furnaces so that I wouldn't have to. What a mentality. That's the David mentality. That's the Abraham mentality. That's the God mentality. The mentality that says, yes, I could consume all this myself. I could just have a lovely, jolly time and play. But I want to invest in tomorrow. Amen? Amen? The wise man, the good man, stores up an inheritance for his children's children. What inheritance could we store up for tomorrow? What could someone in 5 years, 10 years be enjoying because of decisions you're making today? What could happen to people's lives if you and I, yes, enjoy the moment, but understand tomorrow's coming? Wow. Why don't you stand with me? You've been so patient. Friday night, listening to me, rambling on for over an hour. Bless you. Now tomorrow, if you're with us tomorrow, we're going to just unpack this a wee bit more. They're the big concepts of the weekend. Tomorrow we'll unpack it a little bit more. We'll break it down. We'll give you more examples. We'll talk about what it really looks like for us. And I know, listen, I know the challenge is this. St. John, I sort of hear all that, but just getting through 24 hours is a challenge enough. And I understand that too. I live in the same world as you. I understand it. And I'm not minimizing the challenge that every person in this room is facing in the moment of their life. I understand that. But actually, collectively as a community, that if we could dare to dream, not only of today, but of tomorrow, if we could say, actually, my life could last longer than me if I am determined to leave the right sort of legacy. Every one of us in this room will leave a legacy. What we have to decide is which one. That's it. Living Waters Church will leave a legacy. You just have to decide which one are we leaving. The church you're from is leaving a legacy. Which one is it going to leave? Lord Jesus, I pray for each one of us in this room. These are difficult ideas. We sort of deep down in our hearts know they're true, and we sort of say amen to them. And yet, Lord, the reality is that there's enough stuff happening in any moment of time in our lives to just distract us from all of that. We have bills to pay, we have deadlines, we have demands, we have pain, we have disappointment, we have a million things going on in our worlds. And Lord, the enemy so wants to clutter our world, so wants to confuse our world, so wants to busy our world that we never, ever, ever get the chance to think about tomorrow. And Lord, I pray that maybe over this next 24 hours, you will create a little moment of fresh air, a little moment of stillness, quietness, a little moment, Lord God, where we could perhaps just think what life might look like if we were able to dream and think of legacy. Lord, we want to be men and women that live not just in a moment, but live for the big picture. And the big picture is difficult. Sometimes it escapes us. Sometimes it's too big for us. But Lord, I pray that something of your Spirit will live within our hearts, the Spirit of a multi-generational God. Something of the mentality of Abraham will live in our hearts, who left everything he owned to the future. That something of a mentality of David, King David, will live in our hearts. That even though he couldn't build the house, he made sure someone would. And so, Lord, I pray that each of us, in the midst of our own moments, will have the courage to stop, to think, to listen, to be open. Maybe even as parents, as mums and dads, making simple decisions that will affect our children. Making decisions for our grandchildren. Making decisions, oh God, that could just change something by 1 or 2 little %, but make a big difference to our world. So, Lord, I pray that as we literally can see the development of legacy before our eyes, with a new building being built around us, I pray, Lord, that the spirit of legacy will live in the hearts of each person. That we will live in today, but we will build for tomorrow. In Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening.